What if I told you that companies shouldn't just be focused on generating money, but rather also value to society and the planet? This might sound impossible or very unlikely, or maybe potentially possible, but with a huge trade off of not making enough profits. Well, that's not completely true. Because there are many companies currently called B Corps or benefit corporations or purpose driven organizations that do not have a certification scheme or a legal framework that operate and have in their DNA a business model that is focused on generating value to society and the planet. This is called purpose. A purpose driven organization, really, that's what is focused on generating triple kind of value, also including to the shareholders. And it is called stakeholder governance. It's basically a governance of a company that considers all stakeholders. That includes obviously the shareholders of the company, but also the environment where the company operates, or the community, or the employees of the community, and also the suppliers. Also other actors such as NGOs. Obviously, the shareholders per se will continue to be very relevant in this kind of new capitalism called stakeholder governance, and transitioning from the shareholder primacy to this kind of lens, or more than lens, a new kind of DNA of companies. But still, generating economic value will and is still a priority, but not the only one, or not at the expense of the environment and society. And this is a new paradigm, a new shift of doing business. And it's not only on a theoretical level, but rather it's happening. There are many companies around the world that are shifting and are concentrated in making a positive impact. And this starts at the core, at the DNA, at the articles of association, where companies explicitly state what is their purpose. I might have a purpose in my life, which might be becoming a more successful YouTuber, for example, but generating or trying to generate awareness to my audience when it comes to solving humanity's greatest challenges. That could be a personal purpose, or even the company's purpose is if this ended up becoming a company. The same could be done with more or well-established companies or new companies that want to concretely put their purpose first. So we're not talking about the department or an area of a company, but rather the business model is an impactful one. So it's an impact business model. And this is quite new. Obviously, certification schemes and legal frameworks exist since the last 2 decades approximately, starting with the Benefit Corporation legal framework in the US. And these, at the same time, started with a B Corp certification scheme. There are many more, but this might be the most holistic and complete one when it comes to certifying purpose-driven organizations. And still, this is a minority of the companies that operate in this way. Think about it, of Patagonia. Patagonia obviously sells clothing, and that's the business model, but they do it in a sustainable way, not only while considering the materials used, CO2 footprint, and so on, but this is intrinsic in the DNA of the company. This is stated in the article of association, and these are public. And the company has a mandate to generate value also to the environment and to society and the employees of the company and so on, not only economic value at the expense, again, of society and the environment. This is one of the classic examples. There are many more. Of course, they are imperfect, but still, they're in the transition of shareholder primacy to stakeholder governance. And this is magnific. This sounds like Disneyland sometimes, but it might be the only way to solve societies and also environmental problems that currently face us as humanity. There are many, many issues that only companies, also with the public sector and civil society movement and so on, but especially companies will be able to solve. And most likely it will only be possible if companies incorporate this stakeholder governance what's so-called a business model, an impact business model, a purpose-driven organization, because otherwise they might generate economic value and certain societal and environmental value as well, but most likely it will be at the expense of a stakeholder, most notably the environment or the employees of the company or the suppliers of the community where the company operates in. And this creates negative externalities that are not being considered and remediated. So basically, what means is that we're generating a huge issue in the long run if this is not only one company but many companies together, and that's not the way of solving problems. Rather, this is creating problem, a huge one. For example, pollution when it comes to NOx, SOx, or particulate matter, would basically means that that pollution, for example, for combustion engine vehicles, uh, you're breathing that pollution and that creates health related issues. That same car could create climate change, or well, potentially, as these vehicles only contribute to around 10% of CO2 related emissions, but still is a pie of the whole cake, right? So that's the point, right? Instead of generating more problems, companies should transition to solving them, being imperfect. And even if companies are not being born as purpose-driven organizations, as most companies that exist, we're not born with this lens, with this new kind of doing business, as it's a quite new approach. They still can redo their business model, and slowly but surely, especially if you implement a strategy in the long run, you can replace your old business model with a new business model that is much more resilient, and especially a purposeful one, an impact business model that generates value to society and the environment. So yes, it's possible also, even for the worst and the most demonized companies, they should transition to an impact business model and become a purpose-driven organization, because it's not only a matter of solving today's issues and tomorrow challenges for all humanity, but rather is a more of a mission of a business sense of surviving as a company. Because if companies do not proceed and do not change, or radically change and structurally change the way they operate and the business model, they might not be profitable in the long run. And this is being seen because many young generation or young employees want to work for purpose-driven organizations. Same becomes with the bottom line, as there are more and more regulations that state that you need to be purpose-driven. That's obviously a simplification, because there's no regulation that states that, but the point is that, for example, if in the European Union combustion vehicles are being forbidden and they cannot be sold anymore by 2035, or who knows, 2040, I mean, the bottom line is very clear: is you need to transition to electric vehicles as soon as possible. We're not going to get into that legislation and that directive, but the point is, becoming a purpose-driven organization, also because of legislation or regulation, might be the only way forward. And obviously, there are many more reasons, such as becoming a much more resilient company, because of your suppliers treat you much better, as you consider them when taking decisions. That's the core of stakeholder governance, is considering all your stakeholders, including obviously your suppliers. Or for example, the retention rate and attraction rate for new employees is much higher than the competition, because you treat them well and their values are fully aligned with the company, well, and so on. There are many reasons why companies should adopt this stakeholder governance. They should become purpose-driven organizations, good companies, because also their finances might get much better or much worse if they don't do it. Not necessarily in the very short run, but in the medium to long run, as this is obviously a transition for most companies in the world. So next time you decide to apply for a job or to buy a product, think about this. Think that maybe buying a product for a purpose-driven organization might be able to solve a concrete problem, obviously, if many more people do it as well. Or consider when applying for a job that maybe you might be happier and you might be able to solve a problem in obviously of your area of influence, which is very limited, but still it's in your own hands as well to help to solve a specific problem if you join a purpose-driven organization. And this makes you extremely happy, while also you can contribute to making this world a better place. So if you like this type of content, do not hesitate to subscribe to the channel. And as always, enjoy your life, be curious, and be the change you want to see in the world. See you in the next optimistic adventure.